sit up so you don't look naked. Awkward. Hi everyone, it's Jenny. Welcome back to my channel. How are you all? Hope you're doing well. Today, I cannot believe it's time to do my best books of the year so far because it's July, people. Whoa. According to my Goodreads records, I have read 148 books by the 1st of July, which is, definitely my best reading year ever. So it's been pretty hard to narrow it down. I know I'm meant to do 10, but I've come up with 13. So safe to say that by end of year, best books of the year is going to be incredibly hard to pick, though I'm sure I'm not going to read out another 148 books. That's not going to happen. But anyway, let's get on with it. I'm going to try and go through these quickly because there is 13 of them, but we'll see. So the first one is the book that I don't have a physical copy of, and that is Spring by Ali Smith, which is definitely my favourite of her seasonal quartet books so far. It's the third in the quartet, and it's about... It's always so hard to describe these books. It's about the political turmoil that Britain is going through in the world in general, I suppose. This book focuses more on the refugee crisis and attitudes with refugees and how they are mistreated in the detainment centres that they're kept in Britain. Among other things, it's also about a playwright mourning one of his best friends. It's a lot about human connection and what happens when you can try and influence someone to make their lives better or make the world better. But I really loved it. I found it genuinely informative because Ali Smith actually spoke to someone who worked in one of the detention centres for refugees in Britain and obviously anonymously told her the conditions and the treatment that the refugees were suffering from the workers, and it's literally horrifying that it's going on in our country that we think is so tolerant. And it was also just quite uplifting overall, I would say, and it makes you really value your family and the importance of family, and whether that's actual blood family or friends. I thought it was just such a masterpiece, and it also had a Dickens riff because she always has a first line that's a twist on a Dickens first line, and I love that, so I was not disappointed. Then I have a poetry collection, and that is You Sad Feminist by Megan Beach. This is just, still is probably the best poetry collection that I've ever read. This is about what it's like to have mental health issues and illness, but while still wanting to feel empowered by feminism, and how do you live with that dichotomy. It's just really, really relatable poetry, and that's what I love. It's so accessible, I think, but so well written and nuanced. But this is an amazing place to start if you are intimidated by poetry, I think, and if you will respond well to poetry about mental illness, if that's something that you identify with or just want to learn more about. I think it's great because if you have mental illness, you can really empathise with the poetry, and it feels wonderful to have your thoughts articulated, because I think that's one of the hardest things when you have mental illness, is to talk about how you feel or why you feel like how you do, and how that can make you struggle with issues like how do you feel empowered as a feminist when you feel like you can't achieve anything in life generally because you're a terrible person, or you're just a failure at life, or you're not powerful enough. And that is just such an interesting way of exploring it through poetry. But also, if you don't suffer mental illness, it's just a great way of trying to understand what it's like for people that do go through that every day. And I cannot just tell you how much this meant to me. Well, I'm telling you now, but please read this, because this only has 43 ratings on Goodreads, and she just needs more support, and people need to buy this. I'm going to give this to several of my friends. I already have given it to one of my friends. I just love it so much. Yes. Then I have what I think is the only translated book of this, which is not great, but that is Hotel Silence by... every day time to do a video, I'm like, oh, I should have looked at how to pronounce this, but once again I didn't, so here we go. Aurora Ava Olafsdottir. Look, I'm sorry, that's so wrong, but she's, I believe, Icelandic. This again is about a man who's struggling with his mental health and his own identity. He's called Jonas, or Jonas, however you pronounce that, and his wife has left him, his marriage is broken down, his mother is slipping into dementia, so he's finding it hard to understand where his foundations lie, and he only has a daughter, but again, is not her responsibility. I don't want to give any spoilers, but yeah, it's him deciding he's going to kill himself and the way he decides to do that is to get a plane ticket one way to a war zone, or what was a war zone, and kill himself in some remote hotel. And it's about how that is counteracted by him being needed to fix things in the hotel. And that's not a spoiler, that's in the blurb, so I'm not spoiling anything there. Also, I just wanted to say, like, if suicide views a trigger, like, don't worry. It is a much more hopeful book, but it's wonderful because he doesn't disclose what country he's gone to, where he's gone to, what war it is, which makes it, I think, really timeless and relatable, because sadly war is always a factor of life, isn't it? But it's partly about his experience and him trying to, without trying to sound like too stereotypical cliche, but trying to find himself, but it's really also about the women there, and because there's a brother and sister who run in the hotel, and she has a son, and it's also her talking about what happened and the trauma of war, and it's really about both these people healing, and I just thought that was so beautiful. My only complaint is I think the ending is a little bit abrupt, and I just wanted more. I was so invested in these characters. I could have read about this for so long, but it is such a hopeful book, and if you want something encouraging but again it deals with mental health, I would highly recommend this. It's just beautiful, and the prose is so wonderful. Then I have a book that I'm a little bit late to the party for, and that is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I also read Conversations with Friends earlier, but this is definitely my favourite. I heard that people had cried reading this, and I thought, really? That's weird, but I completely cried. I was on a train, I just cried. Oh my gosh, it was an emotional ride. This is about Connell and Marianne, and Connell is popular at school, but he is definitely from a poor economic background than Marianne, because Connell's mother is Marianne's cleaner, or Marianne's family's cleaner. But then when they go to Trinity, it socially switches, and Connell suddenly isn't as popular, and he realises that a lot of the things he cared about socially and the impressions he was trying to make at school really don't matter and count for anything, and suddenly Marianne is the one who has all the friends. And it's really, I would say, a love story, whatever anyone else wants to say about this. And it does deal with, again, mental health. I didn't realise how many books I have that deal with mental health in this pile, but yeah, I really identify with Marianne. That there's just a bit near the end where I just thought, I have really felt like that, and I've just never felt so understood by a character ever, I think, and that is why I cried. But aside from all of the kind of emotional stuff that's going on, especially with Marianne, I really liked the social exploration and observation. She's very good at that. That's what everyone says about Sally Rooney, that her observational writing is excellent, and I could completely agree. But I just, as you know, someone who's gone through that teenage years where you want to be cool, I was never cool, and I really appreciated that examination of that, and how Connell just doesn't need to put himself through all of this, or to act in a certain way just so he can have friends and that kind of thing, because it just doesn't matter in the end, at the end of the day. So it's just a wonderful book, and I'm so happy I read it, and I didn't read it before, but yeah, I think this will probably make it onto my final list, but I have no idea. I'm still got another 6 months of reading to go. I'm aware I'm talking for too long about everything because I'm just so enthusiastic, so I'm going to try and be quicker. This is another book that's had all of the hype, man, and that is Lanny by Max Porter. I'm not going to say much about this because I have spoken about it before, obviously all these books before making wrap-ups, but this is about a boy called Lanny who lives in a village which is kind of in the commuter belt in London, and it's not ever narrated by him, but it's all about him through different narrators. So you have Mad Pete, who is an artist who teaches Lanny, you have his mother, his father, and Dead Papa Toothwort, who is kind of like this mythical presence or spirit, whatever you want to call it, that resides over the village and that's always listening to the villagers, but particularly is interested in Lanny, and it's about him going missing and whether or not they find him. But it's just so poetic and inventive. I think that's why I really love Max Porter, because what he does with the novel and the form of the novel really pushes the boundaries of literature, and I think he's just astounding. And I read this in a day or 2 days, absolutely devoured it. It exceeded my expectations. Then I have a book which I'm kind of cheating about because I did actually read this just at the beginning of July, but I'm going to sneak it in here, and that is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This is about a host of characters, but particularly Pecola, who is a girl that associates beauty with blue eyes because that is also I suppose a trait of whiteness, and she prays every night to get blue eyes. This was just such an incredibly moving account of the struggles that girls and women of colour go through every day when their beauty is not seen and they are not represented, and therefore think themselves inferior as women. And it's just so heartbreaking to read because I don't think that's changed that much. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean, I hope it has. Obviously, I'm not saying women of colour don't think they're beautiful or anything, but just the fact that in the beauty industry, everything is still very white, and there isn't enough representation for beautiful women of colour, or just people of colour in general. And I just loved the way this was written, because it's written never from Pecola's perspective, but from a different character's perspective, talking about Pecola. And I won't say too much more because it is a short book and it's quite hard not to spoil it, but I would say there are definite trigger warnings for rape in this book, because that is quite early on introduced, and it's not a happy read. That is what I will say about this book. It is very sad, but just the prose is achingly beautiful, and I will absolutely be reading more by her. I cannot believe this was her debut novel, at least I think it was. That's annoyingly amazing. Just wow. Then I have the first of 2 memoirs, and that is Deborah Levy's The Cost of Living. I know she has another memoir, but I've heard that this is the better of the 2, and I adored this. I've only discovered her this year, but my goodness, do I love her now. This is about her, I suppose, post-divorce, and the pain of that and the process of that, and finding a place and a space to write. It's almost like finding a room of one's own, and I loved that. And just the way she writes about the experience of being a mother and being a woman in the world generally, and being a woman who is creative as a writer, is just amazing, and it made me want to read all of her backlist. I'm sure I will. She's definitely a new favourite author that I've discovered this year. And there's a bit that I really love. There are lots of observations about how men treat women and how they don't always consider things towards women. I mean, obviously not saying all men are monsters at all, but there's a bit I really like, I just want to quickly read. My wife chose this wedding ring for me. It's Victorian, not really my style, but it reminds me of her. And then he said, my wife crashed the car again. Ah, I thought, as we walked past the golden trees, she does not have a name. She is a wife. I wonder why my male colleague often forgot the names of most of the women he met at social events. He would always refer to them as someone's wife or girlfriend, as if that was all I needed to know. But if we don't have names, who are we? Just so profound. And the whole book is like that. I freaking loved it. I hope you all enjoyed that excellent view of my double chin as I was reading that. Then the other memoir, which also happens to be by a writer, is Why Be Happy When You Can Be Normal by Jeanette Winterson. She is probably one of my favourite authors, and I read Orange Is Not the Only Fruit, which is kind of like a fictional memoir that's partly based on her life, but not completely. But this was my favourite. I preferred this, personally. The way she writes is just so warm and witty, and it talks about her crazy upbringing with an incredibly evangelical Christian woman who adopted her as a baby, and her development of going off and flourishing as a writer and going to Oxford, but also about her journey to find her real mother. And it's just so interesting. I didn't know how difficult it was to locate your real parents. It's incredibly sensitive, and wow, I made me really angry about how she was treated, but it's hilarious and poignant and everything I wanted this to be. And also, if you love literature, if you love reading, then this is the book for you, because she's such enthusiasm for it, being a writer. I think writers inherently are going to write a good memoir most of the time because they understand what it is to engage a reader, and just all the things that she packs into this. There's so much in such a small book. It's impressive, and it just made me love her so much more, if that was even possible. Then I don't want to say this is my favourite, but it might be my favourite book of the year so far, and that is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I'm sure it's not how you say her surname. I'm sorry. I'm just literally like, I'm a book she would name, it should be something like, cannot pronounce any names. I'm so sorry, everyone. But anyway, this is about a woman who is going through some grief and depression issues. Her parents died when she was at college in America, and she obviously hasn't really dealt with that, so she decides when she graduates to take a year off by going to a kind of narcotic hibernation where she takes an incredible amount of sleeping pills and has got to be one of the dodgiest doctors in literature ever, Dr. Tuttle, who is hilarious but also questionable in their methods. But it's really about what happens when you try and avoid grief or emotional turmoil and how that actually can't be avoided. It's set in June 2000 and it obviously has the shadow of 9/11, which is really interesting because you have that tension building with that foreknowledge. It's a little bit nostalgic for me because she watches videotapes over and over again, and I remember videotapes. And it's also kind of funny that she has an obsession with Whoopi Goldberg because I loved Sister Act growing up, so that was my jam. It's also about the complexities of mental illness and grief, how even though she appears to have it all because she's blonde and pretty and skinny and affluent, she doesn't, you know, the fact that she can afford to take a year off work and not do anything because she has that backup money, especially as I forget, in America drugs are really expensive, so if you have to see a doctor and pay for that much medication, that would cost you an actual fortune. So it's a lot about how privilege doesn't always protect you from those things, and it can't fix the fact that your parents are dead, essentially, and it's really about her dealing with that over a year and trying to find peace with herself and her life, essentially. I loved it. Look, this is the 4th book on mental health, isn't that insane? Then I have another Deborah Levy book, which is actually the first one that I read, and that is Hot Milk. And I can just say I haven't even read The Sellout yet, which is the one that won the Man Booker the year this was shortlisted, but I already think I'm gonna hate it because I just love this so much. I don't understand why it didn't win. But it's about Sophia and Rose. Sophia is a girl who doesn't really know what to do with her life, doesn't feel like her life has any kind of direction, and she goes to Spain with her mother Rose because her mother has a mysterious condition where she inconsistently loses feeling and the use of her legs, but it's not something that affects her all the time. So they're trying to solve the mystery of why this happens and how they can fix it. But it's really about their codependent relationship, how her mother obviously physically needs Sophia, but then Sophia also is so reliant on her mother for just emotional and financial support, and how she's kind of like her foundation, a grounding, but it has become sort of toxic with that kind of intense relationship. And I just loved the way that she described the heat of the beach and the setting in Spain. It was very vivid and it makes you really want a holiday, I'll tell you that. But it was just such an adventure for me. I really loved a book about a mother and a daughter, because I think there aren't that many books that solely focus on that. Normally a mother is a sideline character, let's be honest, they're not at the forefront, and I just really enjoyed that. And there's also some bisexuality in it, which was really cool to see, because it was just done really well, and there was no big deal about it. It was just like, yeah, she sleeps with a man, but she also sleeps with a woman. Why not? She's in Spain. So it was just great. If you want like a summer beach read or a holiday read, this is the book for you. If you want something that isn't maybe quite as commercial, maybe something more literary, then I would say this would be a good pick. Then we have a non-fiction book, which is the only kind of outright non-fiction book on my on my list even, and that is British by Afua Hirsch. I just cannot stop thinking about this book. It is so important and I want everyone to read it. Even if you don't live in Britain, you should still read it, because there's just a lot about racism and how that affects people of colour's identity and just general life and upbringing. And I think that is quite a universal thing that isn't just specific to Britain, but I really enjoyed a book about the UK's specific race racism and race problems, because I think a lot of the books are about America, and that's great, that's fine, but I'm not American obviously, so I really appreciated this. There's chapters on the origins, i.e. A lot about colonialism and the British Empire and how that just furthered and kind of, well, I don't want to say established racism because racism was there before the British Empire, but definitely entrenched that belief that we were superior as white people to people who were not white. And there's a great chapter on bodies. Those are the two chapters I probably enjoyed the most. There were some quite shocking things in it, and just sad. Even things about the language that people use to talk about people like athletes like Serena Williams compared to someone like Maria Sharapova, and it's so derogatory and you don't even realise it. And there's just a really good running commentary throughout about the idea that we don't have very overt racism, so it's not the kind of thing you can easily point out in Britain, it's just subtly there, and there's always a subtext to things, and that's the problem, because it's harder to call out because people can be more offended easily about that, saying it isn't racist and try and defend themselves because they didn't use the N-word. And it's just a really genuinely interesting and illuminating look at the problem we have in this country with admitting the racialised institutionalised racism. Wow, I can't talk properly. I feel so passionate. But yeah, that is still alive in this country, and also because she is of mixed racial descent, it's really interesting about the otherness that she feels, and her talking about that and how she felt like she didn't fit into one community over the other, especially with her privilege because she was sent to private school and she did go to Oxford, and how she saw the different communities and how she still was perceived as being black. And I just thought it was such a complex issue, and it's just wonderful to have a book like this written, and I hope it gets more press, because I loved why I'm no longer talking to about people about race, but that had so much press, and that's amazing, that's wonderful, but this hasn't had as much, so I hope that people read this, because it's just so educational, and some of the things genuinely upset me that I learned, but they're important to know. So yeah, this book. Oh. And then last but not least, we have, it's so big, wait, can we see this? The Lost Words by Robert McFarlane. I think the illustrations are by Jackie Morris, and this is the most beautiful book I possibly own. And oh wait. It is a book of acrostic poetry of, wait, this is not an interesting page, let me get to, wait, aha! Of acrostic poetry, and it's the idea that if these words got lost, how you would talk about them to describe it, and it's all nature, so it's all plants or animals, and it's just these beautiful watercolour paintings, and it's just alphabetically organised, and it's stunning, and oh my goodness, I love it so much. And I bought this in Wales from an independent bookshop, and I think it's the best thing I bought all year, honestly. Look at it, isn't it beautiful? And it's a great book for all ages. Everyone my family was looking at it. It would be a really good gift for a child though, I think, just to be more interested in nature. If you want to get them outdoors, you could always look at this book and go and see if you can spot some of these things throughout the year. It's stunning, and I loved it, and I just felt so connected to language and nature when I read it. So it's a quick read, it's a fun read, but the poems are genuinely really good. I was impressed. So yes, this I think also will almost definitely make it to my favourite books of the year. I don't know how long that's going to be, guys, like I'll be honest, because I know some people do like 19 books 2019 or something, but that's quite a lot. But I'll have read like at least 200 books, and that's going to be hard to pick. Just 15, like that would be hard. Like I've got 13 books, I'm only halfway through the year, mate. Isn't it ridiculous? Also, do you find sometimes that the books you read earlier in the year are at a disadvantage? Because I loved If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin, but it didn't quite make it. But I read that, early February or something? And most of the books that are on this list I read quite recently. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's more likely that I'll have more books that I read later in the year on my overall best books, just because they're fresher in my mind, so I'm still excited about them, I still remember them well, because even some of these books that I absolutely love, I still was like, oh, what happened in this? What was the main character called? Does anyone else do that? You just forget books and what happened, the main plot points and characters in it. I'm so bad for doing that. But anyway, I know this has been much longer than I wanted it to be, so sorry. But I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know what your best books are so far. If you have a video, please link it down below. I'll totally go and watch it. And hopefully I'll have a good other half of the reading year, and then we'll see how many of these books make it to my final best of the year. Exciting. So I hope you have a lovely, well, whenever this day goes up, hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you soon for Bookish Shenanigans. Bye!